So what you're seeing here is the commissions application. On this first view here, this is where you can see the dashboard. This is where I can have a standard set of visualizations, reports available to my stakeholders. They can see this dynamically across different attributes of the data by territory, by sales rep, by sales team. But being able to see this information and having that granularity and flexibility to look at this data more holistically is one of the key functions that customers are loving when it comes to the capabilities this provides on top of what NSAW has already natively as part of that process as well. Now, as I mentioned, this is a solution that sits on top of that database. So having all of the detailed transactional information I need to understand around our performance, tracking those KPIs, those measures for our sales team are critical. And within these views here, I can see this data where maybe I want sales reps to be able to come in and create their own visualizations off this data. They can create their own dashboard snapshots, team snapshots that can be shared as well. Some other functions where you can create another snapshot of this report, create and slice and dice different columns, rows, as you think of how you want to structure that reporting. And then that can also be downloaded and shared via CSV, via Excel, PDF. I can send it via email directly from this application at the end of the day. But also, too, as we look at this information, this is all driven off of the data and the rules that are tying in the context of that process. Those rules allow me to have and define what are the criteria I want to be able to utilize for this process. So as we're looking at this example here, I have a class delineation that provides different differentiation between different lines of business in this example. But this would be aligned to your business and your segmentation as you think of what data elements are critical for us to delineate what activity is going to follow which commission process. In that commission process, we can define the commission type. That commission type can be one time. Maybe again, it ties back to more of a spot bonus, a quantity-based model. Maybe it's a weekly average. Other functions, again, that tie into what incentive model, what KPIs are we using to measure this performance and calculate these commissions accurately as a part of this process. So again, by having the flexibility to not only have those broken down here, but your ability to also create them directly within the application gives you a higher level of flexibility when it comes to administrating this process and adding automation to that process as well. Now, as it relates to those commission activities as well, I can see here a breakdown of different statuses for my commission, because we know just getting the data, calculating it, all those pieces take time in context to getting it reviewed, approved, steps before that, preparing it and getting it ready for that process, but also too in relation to a sales rep understanding when is this going to hit my paycheck as a part of that process, especially if it's not always just every other week, as we're thinking about a monthly basis, quarterly basis, depending on that incentive model. Having that flexibility to also provide that level of transparency is great. And that also ties into use cases where maybe it's an eligible versus an ineligible transaction. Because again, I can't tell you how many customers I've worked with where not everything is necessarily commissionable. There could be functions that are tying into other activity that isn't necessarily. So making sure you have that delineation, that visibility and transparency, that process allows your team to really understand what's driving their incentives and pushing them to drive more of that activity as well. On top of that, that's also where you can tie in that pay schedule. Can it be bi-weekly, quarterly, weekly, seeing it all. When it comes to the different timelines of when those incentives are relevant, but also to the timing of when those incentive plans are relevant as well, which I'll talk about here more in a minute. So again, this is where I can break down the full payment schedules as we're looking at this process in relation to each of those commission inputs. This transaction view is nice because it does give me another snapshot of that transaction detail. I can see all the detailed transactions that I was commissioned on as part of this process, but also too, I can slice and dice this. I can look at it by customer. I can get into it at a product level in this example, down to the item level. I can see it by pay period, but I can also see that status we were talking about. I can see here, it looks like I have roughly 21 different transactions that are in a pending status. If there were any that were rejected, I see I have 6 that were rejected. I can take a look at those to determine why were these rejected. Asking the questions around that in context of understanding my performance and what I'm being measured on as a part of that process as a sales rep, sales manager, or sales leader. Now, as it relates to the process inputs, we talked about some of the rules that go into this. The commission plans are the other side of the coin. These commission plans vary based on those commission models. So in this example, I'm looking at one that's position based. Those positions may have different product groups that are associated as a part of that process. Tenure is another variable that we see sometimes in certain use cases for clients. Having targets, those tiers, right? As we think of the structure of the commission plan, But these forms are where you allow you to tailor those views based on the commission inputs you need to capture and the period those commission plans are relevant for. So in this example, I'm making one for this next year. It's going to be applicable for the whole year. It's a biweekly pay schedule, but I can see that broken down at the position level across my product category, the tenure, the targets that are set for this commission plan as a part of that process, so that I understand how these inputs come to be and the rates that are going to be applicable as I think of how these commissions will be calculated. Now, the other side of the coin I was mentioning earlier too is the exception process, right? So this clawback management view is an exception form where I can review and submit data to the application. Those are typically adjustments, clawback requests as a part of that process. Now, this isn't something that's provided access to everyone in the application, right? Only a very specific set of users are going to have access to this. But what this is doing, as well as by being able to come in here and create and again, an example for this overview here too, is I can come in, add a row into this transaction table, add in any critical data elements I need as a part of submitting this request to this process. Can put in date information, client information, sales rep information, rate information as a part of those inputs. But as a part of saving and submitting that, I can trigger a workflow. That workflow will then submit that to the appropriate reviewer to be able to review that. And in this example, I received an email saying, "Hey, Jeff, looks like we got a request submitted to approve a clawback. Please come here and take a look to review that and approve that within the application." It'll give me a link. I can dynamically take me to an approval review form that allows me to then navigate and determine if I need more information or if it's good to go to approve or reject as a part of that process. But that applies to adjustments, those exceptions, those inputs, that process that we know come day in, day out as you look at a growing sales organization and changing process too. One of the other nice but simple features I would say as well is we want to have a schedule here that helps lay out the timing, the expectations of when sales reps can expect to get paid, especially when you have variable timing across different commission plans. So just know you have the flexibility to report on that information as well through that functionality within NSAW. And then the last form here I want to talk a little bit about is the commission request form. So this commission request form is also a place where sales reps can come in and provide a follow-up. Let's just say it's more of a support ticket when you think of it in its foundational nature. But the intention behind this form is I can look up a specific transaction. So let's say one of the ones we were looking at earlier, where I had 6 rejected transactions in that table we were looking at, and I want to know more. I want more information. Why was this rejected? Or I feel like this should have been approved. What's the reasoning behind this? And so in this process, I can go in, I can find this specific transaction I'm referring to. There's a search bar up there too. If I know the transaction number, I can type that in. But as a part of that process, I'm inputting that transaction and it's already actively populating all the information related to that transaction, the amount, the client, the rep, all the pieces that were relevant for a reviewer to be able to look at in relation to that activity, as well as the status of that information. From there, I can determine a request type. In that request type dropdown, this is also where I can provide a predefined sub list of question, of types of requests I want to be able to manage. Is it a status request, a dispute, a missing commission in that process as well? This one's a commission dispute because again, I'm not quite clear why this one was rejected. I can add a description to this process. And that way, this can queue it up from a workflow perspective. If you want that to be routed to the sales manager to help respond, if that's going to be tied back to someone from sales operations or finance and accounting, you have the ability to manage that workflow as a part of that process. And by submitting that, then that gets queued up for review and approval as a part of that process to determine is an adjustment needed here based on the status and review of that information. So at a high level, that's an overview of NSAW Commissions Pro. Um, I think the key callouts that I would highlight as we're talking about this solution, and just to do a quick kind of recap of Commissions Pro and the value it's providing customers today, and potentially for you all, is helping you simplify complex commission processes. That operational layer, that pillar we were talking about, can be very tedious for accounting, for finance teams, but also to especially to give your sales team the creativity, the flexibility where they need to think about how do we incentivize our sales team. Executing on that can be a challenge. And so we want to be able to provide a better framework for the operational team to be able to leverage, manage that process more efficiently, incentivize those sales reps appropriately, and then also too, being able to tie that in more effectively and having a solution built for and around NetSuite and something that's priced very competitively as we think of that in context to other competitors in the marketplace, something we want to make sure we're helping bring to the market, bringing that value of that Oracle NetSuite technology.